Thank you so much for the opportunity to share on the process of grief. I think I want to start with the fact that death comes with discombobulation, disdain, disconnectedness. The process is quite a lonely one, and from a Jamaican perspective, it's lonely because there's no one to really guide you. You have all these government entities, for instance, that you have to interface with to process the death of your loved one. And while you may visit the NIS, the reality is if no one tells you this is the next step, this is what you ought to do, you really are on another discovery. So that's another D from death. So you go through discombobulation, you go through disdain, you go through disconnectedness, and here you are now on another discovery in the middle of your grief. For those of us who work, when death hits, from the government's perspective, you literally don't have any leave in order to deal with the processing of the death. HR, for instance, does not necessarily reach out. And from where I sit, and this would be 7 years? I've never really had anyone from HR, apart from the initial death where they would send out an email communicating to all staff, someone has died for one of our workers, and this is the funeral date, and so on, so that persons can give support. There was never really any connectedness with HR to sit with someone, to sit in the seat of, say, counselor. You were never ever referred for counseling, which is quite important, because after that casket is lowered, that's when life really hits. The hustle and bustle of getting a funeral parlor, persons will assist with that. Everybody shows up at the initial stages that you have to go through. And these initial stages, and notice I didn't say stage, because there are several things that you must do before that funeral date. And caring for self, persons will say, have you eaten, have you showered, and they'll check in just to make sure you're still in your faculties and all the screws are in place, especially if it's a sudden death. So for me, I just want to say that it's good to have community, and from that community, that's what you feed from. But the system itself that should be there to walk you through what you need, it's not in essence a coordinated effort. The funeral home, for instance, we used Romans because of who the loved one was. We ended up using Romans Funeral Home, and within their system they would have somebody reach out to you annually, checking on you, on the anniversary of the death. If you are a part of a church, if the church doesn't have a welfare program reaching out to those who are grieving and so on, you're really left up to the mercies of the winds of whatever blows on a particular day. And so I recognized quickly that, listen, you have to bubble on your 2 feet and get things going. I want to also look at the fact that even though grief causes a level of discombobulation with your own psychological functioning, trying to juggle, trying to understand what just happened. And as I said, especially for sudden death, you begin to recognize that there's so much confusion, which it sometimes zaps you of your energy, your emotional energy that you need to stay connected. And so this kind of evolution that you are on now, because you need to function without the person, and it depends on who died for you, and how close you were to that person. Coming back to work, transitioning into the everyday life and run of the mill can leave you drained. Another D for you. And so in this draining experience, persons may offer words that are not necessarily comforting, because we don't like pain. And so the first thing for us is to defend, why death happened. And you'll hear certain things about, it's God, and boy, I feel them time. Another set may come with, boy, untimely death, depending on the age of the person. And I can smile through that, no. But sometimes you just have to shake your head because people don't know how to handle it. But you did ask me about the psychological effect and the processing and reintegrating self into work. So when you get back to work, and in the case of what I'm sharing as a government worker, apart from colleagues who are there, once again, HR was never pivotal in terms of how do you take back up the reins and function well. The middle managers, supervisors, I believe, ought to be trained. This is supposed to be a deliberate effort from HR, where managing the reintegration process becomes key. We are not to take things for granted, where people are trained in, say, social work, counseling, whatever helping profession, nursing, that they will know how to handle you. Emotional intelligence is a big thing these days, and it is important that people know how, because that reintegration process takes time. And sometimes the way in which we handle each other, because the death is over, it's final, it happened, it's time for you to live now, and it's time for moving on, because persons from time to time will use their own experiences to judge how you should function. And it can be debilitating, crippling. So how did I manage? Well, as a trained counselor and coming from a family background of the helping profession, I literally took on my own healing process. And as a Christian, because that's what I used in order to hurdle and be where I am today, still smiling, still functioning, I was able to, one, work my way through grief. Had a few friends in between, a number of pastors would reach out to me. It's almost like a relay, and God showed up in some unprecedented ways. So there were days when I would be just feeling extremely low as to what on earth happened. This is days. We could use 100 days after, 500 days after, that kind of a thing. Just to say, where are you now with what happened and how are you functioning? One of the things with this reintegration is that there's a lot of paperwork that you have to fill out, and nobody can do it for you. You have to fill out the paperwork, and they were not digitized. I'm into technology for many reasons, and I believe some of these processes, if digitized, it would be a little bit easier. You have all this paperwork to do. And from the Ministry of Finance's perspective, when it comes on to the payout, whether through Ministry of Labor and so on, the bank, you need a new bank account, you need a new TRN, because you have to register the death to get the new TRN. Oh my goodness, that was a process and a half. The tax offices were not saying the same thing. So if you went to one, they take, you get a different piece of information. But here we are, years later, and this evolution, you gain some strength, you gain some insight, and along the way, there are others who you may just have to help. So you jump in and you start helping those who are now in fresh grief while you are processing yours. It takes a lot of effort. So just offering some ease from death, picking on key letters from the word death. You're evolving. You have to exercise a lot of effort. You need to be efficient. People are depending on you, especially if you have children or any form of dependent, and your own workplace has its own tasks. We have PMAS, and nobody wants to fail, and nobody wants it reflected that they didn't do well. And even with the agree to changes form, it is just something that zaps your energy. You'd like to take some time for yourself, not necessarily vacation leave, and that's all you have, vacation or sick leave. We had, I believe it's called compassionate leave at one time, that no longer exists. And so you have to manage the process of the paperwork that goes on long after the funeral in order to satisfy even the insurance company. And one of the good things is that within each entity there is something, but there needs to be a better way to get processing death coordinated. And I just want to encourage persons who may be going through death, take your time. For supervisors, be a little bit more empathetic. We know the job needs to get done, but at the end of the day, if the individual is not at optimal performance because death happened, it means that something is missing, and we need to walk with that person just a little bit closer. Paying attention to details may not be priority for that person. Shift them if you can, or lighten the load of the work if you can. So if you had 15 things to do, give 7 instead. Spread the work out a little bit more so that the achievements for the year can be accomplished by March 31 before the new financial year. Additionally, apart from the disdain, the discombobulation, the disconnectedness, the draining experiences, I just want to use my own experience to say to persons, on the days when you realize you just can't go any further, say to your immediate supervisors, if you need to visit HR, if you need to write a letter, don't allow your emotional distress to hide you behind a mask and you're not doing well. Take the days that you need. We know there are not many. I think it's 10 or 14 depending on when you started in the system. I can only speak from what I know where government is concerned as a government worker. And I know that grief, hits different for everybody else. Maybe in the private sector they have a different setup. But this goes to show, based on our pre-conversation, that we really do need a national policy on grief, not just something in law, a statement under a heading. We need a policy to really manage the process of grief. Once again, thank you for the opportunity, for allowing me to share in this way. There's so much more. that I could share, and it could take us hundreds of hours managing the tears in the middle of meetings. You don't even know what triggered it. It just came and it bursts out, I have very good networking, very good support, very good family base. What happens when the entire family is affected? Oh my goodness, it's so much. And what happens when death hits the same group of people at work at the same time, in the same season? Who do you lean on? That is why HR is so critical. It may seem a little bit roundabout and sketchy at first, but you will find your rhythm. It is often said in grief that you are not to change your routine. So if you wake up at 4 o'clock, keep waking up at 4, even if you don't do anything much. If you normally drink your tea at 7 o'clock, drink your tea. Have the conversations. And for me, I paid for counseling. The ministry, in its position with welfare, did not recommend, did not assist. There's not a grief purse to assist with anything. So you have to figure this out on your own. And the finances can be daunting. Another D word for you. So death, though final for the person who died, really now is another chapter for you who is left behind. And it's important that you turn each page, write on each page. This kind of what positive psychology really promotes is a balance of the negative and the positive. Don't ignore the challenges, and just celebrate certain things. No, do both. And you will understand how life is with the mix of joys and sadness. Take the time to heal. You will find new things to do. I did art, resurrecting my grade 9 art. Oh my goodness, when my art teacher, we were using art to help me to hurdle. And when I drew my first piece, I cried. I couldn't believe I was able to produce something like that. Your family members, your friends, and so on won't even understand why you're so overjoyed at producing something. It's okay. It's about you, your healing, and how you show up in order to interact with others on a daily basis. So you'll find your footing. You'll discover new things about yourself, even in the discovery of, oh my, in this process, I need this paper. Oh, and before I forget though, there's something very critical when it comes to the death certificate. I'm not sure what has changed. I really have not been checking in with what the government has been doing. But the death certificate, everybody wants an original. And you have so many places to interface with. So that's another set of costs that, you have to undertake. Paying for the death certificate. It is a lot. And I think the government could actually look at allowing for certified copies to be utilized. You may need a lawyer if you don't have children when death happens to your loved ones. For instance, a husband and wife. It's a lot that you have to go through on your own. And as I'm talking with you, my mind has gone back to the hospital scene. Oh, good grief. Whether private or public, it is a mess. I don't know what's happening there. But my experience in the middle of death was not a good one. And I won't call the name of the private hospital, but Our helping professionals need to really check themselves. Whilst they're not there to, blow snot and bawl with the individual who is now in pain, but the least you can be is be human, And so that hospital scene can get quite crazy. Where should the body go? Who is coming to check on the body? Who is going to write the death certificate? That is one mess. The hospital not writing it, although the person died here. You have to find the doctor who was treating the individual before. I'm like, what? This is crazy, but the person died here. Oh, well, we can't write this. They, oh my goodness, they. So the hospital scene, there are supposed to be chaplains who are helping you. I watch the chaplains walk to and fro, and not one of them say "Ke" to me. That was one drama. But hey, all is not lost. So even within the disdain, the discombobulation, the disconnectedness, and all of that, you will have people who are hurdling with you. Pay attention, mostly, to the good things. Pay attention to the fact that life is still happening despite the separation from your loved one. Don't despise any help. People are trying, especially in a system that is not coordinated. And I hope I have shared enough to make the case that Jamaica needs a human and resource response through a policy, not just for individual workplace, but as a nation that will guide both private and public sector. Every blessing with your assignment as you go through.